What's up YouTube, and welcome back to Homebrew Subaru. In this episode I'm going to finish up the wiring and show you all the connections I made to make everything work. So what's up everyone? This is more or less going to be a show and tell video, just because I've spent so many hours doing the wiring. At least another 10 hours I put into this after the harness was into the car, just making sure I've got the proper connections and kind of splicing what I need from the one harness into the other harness. So we're going to start out here under the hood, and I'll show you the couple things that I had to do under here, and then we're going to go inside the car and I'll show you what I've done there. So everything kind of begins on this corner, the front left corner of the car, where the factory engine harness connectors come through. So all the grounds are on the one connector that would feed the OEM ECU, and they all pretty much go right to the intake manifold where most Subarus get their grounding. So I've done that. I've basically made a little harness for, I think there's 4 or 5 ground wires that goes all the way underneath the intake manifold, all the way to the grounding point just up here on the coil. And with those all attached, the ECU should have all its grounds and all the battery plus power from the inside of the car, so that the ECU should power up and function, or try to. Now there is one more circuit I decided to take out of here, and it's actually for the evap purge solenoid. I have this feeling that the WRX ECU may be able to run the evap system, so I've just taken that one grounding wire that would switch from the ECU, and then it would actually just like click on and off the purge solenoid for the evap system. I may try and put that in sometime later, but I decided, well, after the fender goes on, it would be difficult to get at the wiring, so I'll just leave that wire exposed for now, and if I need it, it's there. Another thing that will have to happen later on is remounting the windshield washer bottle to the rear into the trunk, because there's not really room here for it anymore, and I don't mind having it in the trunk. I've had it there before on my last car, so I'll have to extend that wiring to the back. I needed to take B+ battery positive into the car and have it on 30 amps. So I've made an eyelet there, and that is soldered connection. I can put my 30 amp fuse in here, and this is a 10 gauge wire that goes all the way into the car, and yeah, I can fasten it up a little better here and put a grommet in later, but that sends my power into the car, and it is a fused connection right at the battery. So first thing you'll notice is I've started taking all the painted Hot Boy trim parts out of the car. There's no need for them. The center console is going to be changed to the 2005 console from the other car, so a lot of this is going to have to come apart eventually anyway. But up here in the instrument cluster, there's 2 circuits I have hooked up, and one is for the oil pressure light, so low oil pressure, the switch grounds and sends ground up to the cluster, which turns the bulb on. That's an easy one to pretty much hook up on any car. The other one is the coolant temperature signal, so that's coming directly from the coolant temp sensor and going directly to the gauge. I'm not 100% sure if the resistances are different from NA to turbo, but I'm pretty confident it's the same sensor, and likely the gauge is going to work perfectly fine hooked up that way. Now over here on this side of the car is a drastically different story. So you can see wire is still spilled out everywhere, and I'm gonna try and organize it before the end of this video. But we're gonna go through some of the things that I have done here. You can see up here, this is our main 3 ECU plugs that are coming through the firewall. So there's 1, 2, and 3. And I've gone through all the wiring that I don't need and kind of just looped it up out of the way. And then branching off of there is some spaghetti. So the first main thing coming through is the 10 gauge wire coming off of the battery with the 30 amp fuse on it. So this is my main battery positive coming into the car to power everything that's not original to the car. So we're doing the ECU and whatever entails to it. And coming off of this, first we'll start with the relays. So that is sending power over to 2 relays that are being used as the main relay, and one does the O2 sensors and the other powers up most of the ECU. Moving along, the data link connector. So I have the data link connector completely wired up. I've got a ground coming off of it here, which will go to the same place as the relays. I've got power going to the other side of that 15 amp fuse. The only thing here is the data line connectors, or the data line wire colors, because the connector is actually out of the legacy in the backyard, and I can't tell by the wiring diagram which is the high and low data circuit. So I haven't soldered those two. I'll have to plug in the scan tool and see if I can communicate with it. If not, I'll have to switch those lines around, and then I can solder them up and finish up that part of it. And I'll kind of have that harness maybe sitting up here somewhere tucked underneath, but a little bit long so I can actually just drape it down and plug it in easily. Now kind of moving on to the WRX ECU, which is right here on the floor. So the first thing is the crank signal. The crank signal I'm actually going to send into the WRX ECU. So I've cut the factory wires of the WRX harness going to its crank sensor. I don't need my signal going all the way down that harness. I just want it to go into the WRX ECU. I don't know if it's going to work properly, but the idea is to have this ECU send its signal over to the instrument cluster so it works properly and I get a proper reading tach. This may not work, and it may actually cause the car not to run, or run not really good because the signal is actually being split. But from just thinking about it, I can't really come up with a reason why it won't work. So it's just a theory at this point, and I'm gonna have to try it. The next 2 circuits are the neutral switch. So the neutral switch coming from the WRX harness, I'm sending to the ECU that I'm putting into the car, and then the starting signal coming from the WRX harness, because we're using the WRX harness to crank the starter, so that signal has to be sent to the ECU that I'm installing into the car. And then the last 2 circuits here are for the cooling fans. So the ECU I'm putting into the car will switch on the fans, and the fan circuits are hooked into the WRX's harness so that they can just switch on the WRX relays, which will control the fans out underneath the hood. Way further at the back here, there was just 2 wires coming through that also need to be grounded. One was for shielding, and I believe the other for O2 sensor grounding. So all the grounds will go over to the one post over on the kick panel, and I'll have battery positive attached over in here somewhere where it can't be disturbed at all. And then loom everything, and I think I'm gonna call it good after that. So here you can get a better idea of how everything lays out. I've got loom over quite a few things. The other ECU is actually tucked up in place, and I know this looks like a rat's nest, but it's all in there quite fastened well, and most of the majority of it is loomed. And as long as that I can get this ECU retained well, I think that's a perfect position for it. I've got the WRX ECU back down on the floor, and you can see just a couple of these circuits kind of need to be wrapped up around the blower motor. And the DLC connector, I'm just going to leave this open for now until I can ensure that I've got the circuits properly. And I was thinking I might even get the mounting bracket for it and put it underneath here somewhere, fasten it there or something. And the ignition circuit's over here, so just got to figure out a switch on the other center console when I put it into the car. And I've got the relays tucked up in here nicely, fastened quite well, and the wiring drops down in there. All the grounds are on, and then I've got 2 extra grounds, one that's quite long that can go up to probably where the gauges will mount just when I go to do them later on. I've got everything back together temporarily for the most part. I'm pretty sure I'm done with the WRX ECU, so I put the floor plate back on, the carpet that covers it, and the floor mat. I mean, if I need to get back to it, it's only a few nuts and bolts. And then the glove box is just temporarily back in place because I'll take it back down when I go to run it. The 15 amp fuse can probably be reached from right up in here. And then the DLC connector, figure out where that's going to go later on. So I've got the wiring all completed. Now I say that, and there's always more wiring to do, from like gauges to remote locating the battery to the trunk to doing the blow-by headlights. So I mean, there's going to be more wiring later on, but everything that runs the engine and splicing it into the car to make it kind of work should be completed at this point. So next up is kind of completing the exhaust and getting it finalized. I've got everything that I need to build the up pipe finally. There's going to be there's a few more changes that I decided to make, so you're going to have to wait till the next episode to see that. And if you like this episode, definitely give it a thumbs up. And if you're new here and you haven't already, please consider hitting that subscribe button for me. Leave your questions and comments further down below. And I'll see you in the next one.